Hey everybody, thank you for joining us on this IT Secure and Microsoft webinar, Secure by Design, your pathway to a secure future. My name's Steve McKeveney. I'm the CTO at IT Secure and your host for this session today. This is the agenda we're going to take you through today. I just say before we start, I recognise there's a mix of people in the session today, some who know ITC and others who don't. Rather than burn time on an introduction to the company, we will follow up with an email with a brief overview of our business to help you understand those who don't know us to date. So for the agenda today, we're going to look across the evolving landscape, how it's shaping up, the positives and the negatives and what it means for us. Looking at how SOCs are performing globally and where those challenges are to really optimizing service. And then try to boil that down into what is our problem statement? What can we do about the situation to ensure that we've got the best possible environment for our businesses? We believe that is by this Secure by Design methodology we're going to take you through today. And following that, looking at how Microsoft's security portfolio can really help your business achieve its security objectives. As part of that portfolio, we'll also look at AI and its part to play in considerations around executing with that technology. So, looking at the threat landscape, the bad news is all of the trends are heading in the wrong direction. If we look at the cost of cybersecurity breaches across all industries, it's going up. There's a 10% increase in that cost. And that's not just for large businesses. We see significant numbers there for small companies. As you see the points I'm calling out on the slides today, the text in blue is showing you those reference points. There's some interesting data points in all of these documents, and I do recommend, if you have the time, to review these and see the wider detail within them. Also, the barriers to entry, unfortunately for cyber criminals, is getting lower, and the professionalism of their environment is increasing. They are working together. They are pulling on technology such as ransomware as a service, AI, and being able to put forward much more sophisticated attacks without any real technical capability on their side. And an indicator of how that's changing, we've all seen quite poor quality phishing attempts to defraud us, but now 1 in 4 people are claiming they've experienced or know someone who has a voice cloning attack, taking very advanced techniques, impersonating someone in your business and giving instructions that we see being very effective in defrauding businesses. And that perennial problem of resources. The skills gap has been a challenge for several years in cybersecurity, and that continues to increase. There's 20% increase in the skills gap, and as we can see from this IBM report, that equating to real monetary impact, that $1.76 million in additional impact to a breach cost because of those resource restrictions. But there is good news. Businesses are paying attention and they are taking action. So there is an 8% increase in spend globally. So reaching that 87 or even eclipsing that $87 billion in 2024, showing that intent of the market to protect the businesses we're so concerned about. And looking at the environments, we can see across a number of measures an improvement in our cyber hygiene, doing the things that are right to protect us from those attack techniques. And we know there's many unsophisticated attacks out there, but unfortunately, people do still fall for them. So making sure that we have the right malware in place, we have the right controls, we are using protection around the environment, and we're communicating to people around the right approaches to take when we see those suspicious activities, such as a phishing email trying to defraud the business of money or to take a wider reach into our business. And looking at the UK against 75 peers, we've actually ranked quite well. You know, we're 8th out of 75 from a kind of cybersecurity and capability measure. So, you know, a lot of things are going right. However, if we are spending that money and making that investment and doing those improvements, why are companies still getting hacked? And we can see in the UK alone, 74% of large businesses, you know, have experienced some form of breach in the last 12 months. As I say, not just large businesses, 70% of medium, 58% of small businesses. And those small businesses would be 500 people and less. So this really is an important factor for all companies. And when we look at the fact that people are exploited and you know and have these considerable news stories in the market that none of us would ever like to experience, no one ever says they didn't have protection. They have protection in the environment. So why is it still happening? And if we look at the challenge on the defenders in the marketplace, this is a report run by Vectra, and they go out across 2,000 global security operations centers to understand what are the metrics, what are the performance metrics within those environments trying to protect companies. And we can see that the mean value of a number of tickets per day is sitting at nearly 4,000. That's a significant load on any entity to try to manage risk across an environment. You know, and of that 3,800, 38% of that is being addressed, meaning 62% is ignored. And when we think about that compounding on a day-by-day, month-by-month basis, that is a huge amount of signals not being investigated, of which there are probably some key indicators in there that defenders want to know about and can take action on. But not only is it missing those true attacks, it's creating a significant cost that we're not getting return on, because either that is hardware that is scaled to carry that amount of capacity, or it is ingestion into a cloud-based service that is costing us money to take that data in that we're not even acting on. And then at the bottom of the table on the right-hand side, that review that only 16% of that load is actually valuable to protect against attacks. So definitely an area for improvement there. And on the left-hand side, the report that 71% of companies have 10 different security tools providing them information, and 45% 20 or more. And yet half of those SOC analysts are saying that the tools are more of a hindrance than they are a help. And so creating confusion and not getting to the root cause we want, or the root outcome we want, which is actually protecting the business. And so what is our problem statement? How do we improve this situation? And it's not about technology. It's not that we can say we don't have enough technology. In the endpoint market alone, there are over 400 vendors available to us that we can draw on to have protections. And we've just seen from that Vectra report, you know, too much technology is actually a bad thing rather than a good thing. The risks aren't recognized. Well, that's not true. Again, we're seeing that increased spend. And from Forbes, a report that they're seeing 65% of organizations planning to increase their spending on cybersecurity, even though we're going through very tough market times. So we do actually understand that risk, and we are invested in addressing it. But I think the challenge is how we go about it. And too often, we're rushing to a solution before we really understand the problem. And so what we need to do is invest more time in developing our intelligence on the field of play, the landscape that we're looking to protect, and the characteristics of the attackers and their objectives before we rush to deploying solutions, and being much more focused on our objectives and our outcomes as a true solution that's built on addressing a defined problem. And this is a slide that I borrowed from Microsoft. It's on a Sentinel review, and it really calls out this problem statement that I can recognize in the market when vendors and service providers are coming together with customers and we're not working together well enough. We're not spending enough time looking at the landscape and understanding the landscape. So the green side is the client. They understand the business. They understand the criticality of data, the sensitivity of data. They should absolutely understand the architecture and the environment that their business is working across, but they don't necessarily have the time to communicate and share that and work with the vendors to inform them. On the left-hand side, those service providers and vendors, they know the tools, they know the technologies, they know the way to implement them, but they're lacking in understanding of that client environment. And so what typically happens is both parties want to rush to the solution. Both parties want to get something done and then move on in their busy worlds. And the result is we end up with generic solutions that in principle should be fine, but still leave gaps in the environment. And those gaps are what allow the attackers to still come in and exploit that environment. And so that is our challenge, how we as a community work together to bring the intelligence on the left-hand side with the knowledge on the right-hand side and get this position of knowledge and then have this secure by design solution and service built around tangible information around that environment. So there's an approach that we've invested time and effort in that I believe is the way to overcome this challenge and really to help us achieve this. So as we can see, this wheel, and it is a continuous wheel, it doesn't stop. We should review and do this activity in a periodic basis, but it starts with looking at ourselves, looking at the digital landscape we operate on. And that's where the process should start, ultimately coming to a conclusion of what the technologies are to meet our needs. Which, as I say today, too often the companies say, hey, you're the experts, you tell us what we should have, and then people sell on the latest trends. This is what everyone's buying at the moment, therefore have this, it's good. So coming from that position of understanding and knowledge. So first of all, can I map out the field of play? Have we got a diagram that helps understand the end-to-end architecture? How are the business built? What are the locations? How do they communicate? How are they protected? What are the users around that environment? Whether they're internal users who are using business systems, whether they are support users who are doing for the IT support, functional support, whether they are guests coming in and accessing that environment. There could be agents working those systems or third parties who are part of that broader ecosystem. But getting that view of who's connected to the environment and then how do they connect, both physically and via authentication methods, so we can understand that chain of connectivity. And then understanding how they're connecting to those services that they utilize, where those services exist. Are they on-premise? Are they in the cloud? Are they delivered by SaaS? Or are they in a cloud environment run internally? And then what are the right tools that can be deployed across that environment? So what tooling is already in place? And what controls are there to protect that environment? And so once we've got that understanding of our own world, then let's think about what attackers are trying to achieve in hurting my business. Is it for monetary reasons, political reasons, ethical? What is their agenda? So often it is about stealing money or ransomware to extort money. But someone may be in interest where there is an ethical angle and there's a hacktivist who wants to make an impact. So is it about destabilization or sabotage? So getting to understand what they're trying to achieve and therefore what we're trying to protect. And when we think about some of those techniques of stealing money, business email compromise being a common way that is achieved by fooling someone into partnering with money. Well, who can actually do that? Is that everyone in the business? Or is it those people maybe working finance or with access to a company credit card that we focus that attention on? So understanding what those objectives are and then how they execute on those goals. So whether it's on a finalizing that activity, whether it's that exfiltration of data or that encryption and destruction of data as they move into sabotage or ransomware, or as they move across or try to access the environment via things like brute force activity, MFA compromise, or that lateral movement once they've got a foothold in the business. Understanding what they're trying to achieve and how they get there gives us clarity on how we defend. Because quite often we will see something and we focus too much on that symptom. Business email compromise is not their end game. And ultimately, whilst a major convenience and something we don't want isn't necessarily catastrophe, but if that business email compromise is leading towards ransomware and locking everybody out of systems or the leaking of privileged and sensitive information, then that's getting more towards that end game and ultimately something we need to understand and protect end to end. So then looking at what we have in place to address the situation, and it isn't all going to be technology. There may be processes that we are putting in place. For instance, if we do think that business email compromise is an attack technique used to defraud us, then how can we put checks and balances in place outside of that communication media before any action is ever taken? So that awareness training could be one approach to overcome that, but also looking at controls in the environment, having stronger posture, stronger capabilities to mitigate risk before it gets exploited. Then yes, the tooling. What tooling can we deploy across the environment to help protect us, but coming from a position of knowledge now that we understand what the risk looks like. And once we've looked at our tooling and our controls, what are our gaps? What can we do better? And then on understanding the gaps, that's when we finally get to the solutioning, because it's now having the context of where the risk is, where our exposure is, and our most important assets that we want to prioritize first. And this is something that we've actually seen in the marketplace with clients, where ultimately, because of the way the engagement happened and everyone being busy, people forgot about a key system. Everyone's looking at the edge and the endpoint and the fact there were a vast amount of users out in the environment collecting sensitive data, taking that data and using it for the business purpose. And so endpoint controls were put in place. But ultimately, that data was being fed into a centralized service running on a CRM based in Dynamics. And that Dynamics was having a back-end security in Azure to store that sensitive information. And that business need wasn't even discussed, highlighted, and protected. And so being able to see that in an end-to-end flow and start to understand that sensitivity and that criticality, because that's what attackers are going to go after, we can start to think about putting those right controls and right protections in place. So this is an approach that we call threat profiling, and it goes via those 6 steps to start with understanding, start from a point of knowledge, and then lead to qualified solutions. And the picture's key, because it's the picture of being able to take a step back and see that ecosystem where we suddenly start to really understand how complex this challenge is that we're looking to address. And so starting with something generic like this and then starting to say, okay, let's draw this out to look like us. What does our estate actually look like? How are these people connected? And where are the points of sensitivity where I'm breaking out of my private environment and connected to that public domain, where I'm allowing these guest users in? And what are these guest users connecting to? What are my users are connecting to? And if someone compromised my user, what does that mean that they have access to? And what are the steps across the chain that I can now monitor and identify risk and look to remediate that risk? So looking at this and laying on the services where they exist, how they're authenticated, who's using them, who isn't using them, giving us absolute clarity so we can now shape that risk environment and shape the protection against it. So technology is important. Of course, it's important. Without the technology, we couldn't do what we do, but it should follow, not lead. So once we're at the point of saying, now we know what we need to cover our environment, that's when we bring the technology to the table. And as we said at the start, Microsoft does have a portfolio that can help. And the reason why it can help is it's such a broad set of tools offered in a very cohesive and integrated manner that work together to manage that risk. So once we've defined our landscape, we'll start to see that complex environment and that breadth of attack areas that could be exploited. And unfortunately, there's not one thing, that one thing we just deployed that covers all bases. We will need to draw from this broad range of tools that will give us the right coverage across all the areas we identify are in play. And we can see areas, endpoint identity in Defender 365, which are commonly deployed, and then some of the lesser areas, maybe around cloud apps to protect our SaaS environment, Office 365 to assist us from phishing. Looking in the cloud space, where we see functional areas like databases and storage, or those servers or those containers that we obviously want to protect in that environment. But even the infrastructure, so that resource management of that estate that we can protect from anomalous and suspicious behavior. And Sentinel as that overarching SIEM, which can cover many of the areas that Defender is covering, but actually should be tuned so that it isn't replicating and copying that data, but is complementing it. So what are the things that Defender isn't covering that Sentinel can? And this could be things like your network and security appliance. You may have some other security tooling, and it could be business systems. That example of Dynamics 365, there is no Defender agent I can put in that service, but I could collect key information like logons and changes to rights and capabilities that could be an indicator of a compromise on that critical business system. So we do need to still collect from multiple tools. What's key is that those tools need to work together. They need to be cohesive. We've seen that challenge from that vector report of tools creating noise and adding to the problem. So their efficiency in how they're deployed is critical. So why is it a better portfolio, a better solution? And that's commercially and operationally. The graphic is showing a piece of messaging around E5. It's been around a while in the marketplace now. The breadth of the service, all of the things it can cover, when you look at a multi-technology, multi-vendor approach on the right-hand side, and you shrink that down via E5 licensing or even at E3 with a bolt-on, if we're looking at security specifics, can reduce that total cost of ownership. Obviously, the Defender for Cloud gives you that ability to expand that coverage. and add from that portfolio of services, and you purchase what you need, what is relevant to you from that portfolio. What's critical is that they work together. They work together in a cohesive manner. They don't create complexity, they actually create more clarity through that integrated operation. And then Sentinel being added into the equation adds even greater value because it allows us to bring those critical log sources from areas like Dynamics 365, managing those critical systems, along with those defender indicators, and then create that multi-stage attack indication as we're getting multiple subtle indicators across the environment that on their own maybe aren't going to set off the alarms, but pulled together by that fusion engine will start to show a more interesting attack and something to be addressed. And obviously, AI is an area of focus, and Copilot for security works particularly well with that Defender suite to enable people in the business to perform more effectively around the management of their responsibilities. When it comes to operating the service, there are two approaches. So there is a new platform, so the USX, bringing together Sentinel into the Defender portfolio and having that single pane of glass where you can see both sets of services driving all of those indicators in one place. Alternatively, you can ingest your Defender alerts into Sentinel and see everything in that one place. Now, one of the real values, and what we're trying to illustrate on the right-hand side with the commercial bubbles, is that if I'm taking those Defender alerts into Sentinel, then I'm doing so at zero cost. There is no ingestion overhead in doing that. However, if I do that with multiple third-party tools to use my SIEM to see all of those systems coming together, well, then I start to ingest additional costs into that environment. And I'd also question, am I creating a level of complexity for my SOC and for my SEC admins who still have to now manage multiple technologies, multiple skill sets? If we can take all of that from one place, give them a common and familiar interface in managing these different areas of context that is all working together, we can reduce the load on that environment and increase the focus on true risk. So when it comes to optimizing your solution, be led by your requirements. We're all busy. We know how hard it is to find the time to really do the investigative work. And we have sat down with clients who actually, as they start to look at how systems work, where systems are, what the authentication is for the different types of users, they realize they don't know. Problem is, your attackers will find out. That is what they're leveraging. Our lack of knowledge creates exposure that allows them to succeed. And so us taking that time to understand and then to move from there is critical to our objectives of having that secure environment. So be led by your risk, your environment, and make sure those solutions are delivering a quantifiable value to your business. Select the right tool. So when you look at Sentinel, it may be capable to have it bringing log sources from elements like an endpoint or from a domain controller. However, if there is a purpose-built Defender for that piece of context, it will deliver a higher fidelity output. It will be more efficient and reduce that noise and drive the effectiveness of your SOC and make the life of your SEC admins easier if you have the right tool doing that job. And then invest the use of your SIEM into those areas that will support the gaps that your security tooling isn't covering. And also, when we think about empowering that SOC to take remedial or remediation action on suspected attacks, whether that's on an account we believe may be compromised, or an asset, an endpoint we think is compromised or may have malware on it, the easiest way to enable that SOC to deliver that remediation is via that security tooling. Manage what you're monitoring. So don't ingest data for the sake of it may be useful. Have that understanding, because it is a cost. And sometimes that cost may remove budget from areas that actually would give a greater return. So having that efficiency and managing that means that we can have stronger protections. Choose the right types of storage. If something's coming in that is for investigation reasons only or compliance requirements, something we're going to draw on later, as opposed to analyzing on a 24/7 basis, then do not bring it into analytic logs. You're going to spend a lot of money for something to just sit there and have little usage. So that right type of usage of the environment is critical. And then that example I said earlier, don't miss those critical business systems. Just because you're talking to someone and you're expecting them to be the expert and they're ticking off log sources for the SIEM environment, they're ticking off defenders for the endpoints and identity and your cloud apps, you know where your critical services are. You know what is sensitive and needs to be protected. So make sure those business systems don't get forgotten about and absolutely are captured. And we have to keep reviewing. This is a dynamic environment. Our world will change. We will re-architect our systems. We will launch new services. We will invite new users. And so that world will change. That playing field will change. But so will the attackers. Their approaches will get smarter. And so understanding them and how they're changing ways on our environment is impacting the risk needs to be looked at continuously as well. So reviewing that and managing that is key. And that includes the efficiency of the system, doing it in a way that is not just operationally sound, but also is cost effective. So looking at the top talkers, the things creating the most noise, and actually, can I remove that and tune that so I still get the high value output, but I reduce the load and the cost that it's creating on the business. So AI, I mean, it has been the focal point across our industry for more than a year now. And that question, can AI help this situation? It can, of course it can. But help what? What exactly is it we're looking for it to help us with? And this is no different to that problem statement I called out earlier, that we look to race to the solution. We look to think technology is the answer, and AI is no different. We see people in the industry who've made a decision to go to AI because, well, it's the right thing to do. It'll give the right message in the market. But actually, they haven't thought of the outcomes they're trying to get from AI. What is it going to do for them? How is it going to help them? And so, yes, this is a really powerful technology. Yes, we should be able to find a benefit, but it's down to us to define those outcomes. And that starts with what our business is looking to achieve. Now, here's some example outcomes from the world of cybersecurity that we could be looking at and saying, well, this is what I want that AI technology to help me achieve. It could be about enabling me and my team to remove the most critical vulnerabilities from my environment. I don't have the time to look over all of that data. How do I use AI to do that for me, to highlight how to address the most important points and to show me how to most effectively remediate that for the business, because I just don't have the staff or the time to achieve that for me. How can I ensure that my data is effectively protected and can't be stolen, and therefore ransomware to get it back or sold on if it has value in the marketplace, and then obviously embarrassing my brand, my customers? Can it assist my SOC to quantify risk better and faster and actually remediate the situation before it gets to that full execution? Or can it just help me provide an executive level report so I can be more easily understood when I'm reporting that state of the nation on my environment to my executive around the risk to our business and getting their attention and their focus because it's in a way that they can consume. It could even be around the governance and the frameworks we're looking to follow and that are shaping our business and our industries. Can AI help us there? So the defining of what it's going to do is that first step and that most important step. And the recognition that your outcomes often align to people. This is a Microsoft slide. It's part of the AI deck created. But if you look at this, where it's talking about areas of AI impact, it's linking it to a data loss prevention analyst. So yes, it's talking around the error risk, but it's also recognizing someone has an ownership of that function. Someone there is driving that activity. Insider threat analyst, system administrators, identity access management administrator, compliance. They've all got people. AI is not coming in and removing the work from us. You've probably heard the term before. It's a co-pilot, not a pilot. Now, we still need to invest in people. This is an enabler, an amplifier, but it doesn't remove the people from the equation. And so when we're looking at AI, we need to recognize that it is an investment in people. That without them, we can amplify 0 by 1,000. It is still 0. And that whilst it will create efficiencies in our business and can do the heavy lifting, there will be new challenges that people will need to do to work with the technology. And this could be things like prompt engineering, so we get the best out of the technology and it helps us effectively because it does need our direction. And then also recognizing if we invest in people, if we help them realize the potential of the technology, then we get more out of it than just cost saving. Growth is a potential. As we look at every industrial revolution we've been through, and AI is our latest one, it always starts with a little bit of concern around we're going to lose our jobs to the technology, to the machines, the Luddites smashing up the spinning jennies. But actually, it's an enabler, it's an empowerer. We get more growth, we get more potential. It's not about reducing cost. It should be about increasing top line into increasing growth. And someone said something back in 1994, which I think still resonates today. You know, technology is nothing. Well, I wouldn't say it's nothing because without it, we couldn't do what we can do. But recognizing the importance of people, that they, along with the technology, that combination of people, technology, and process together driving the outcome that will create those wonderful things. So when we're looking at moving our environment of saying, we know we need to be more secure, let's go back, let's understand the environment before we rush into the solution, into the technology. Let's look at that, look at those flows, look at those dependencies, then layer on, invest in the people, drive the right outcomes. So, next steps. What should you do if this is a journey that resonates and something you think you should pursue? Well, we're more than open to speak to. IT Secure has experts. We're going to provide a reach out to you. I've already said we would follow up from this session with emails with a brief on the business. So if you want to run through that threat landscape analysis, do that threat profiling, we're more than happy to work with you and your teams in doing that and driving that visibility and having that position of knowledge. We also have an event in January, 23rd of January in London. It's our ITC Cyber Security Summit. And there we'll be talking about a lot of the macro drivers around the world of cybersecurity, but also how that then does touch into your world and your environment and things you can do practical to protect your environment and drive a safer business. That's it from a presentation side. I believe we've had the opportunity to raise any questions through the session. Sophia, if there's any questions, happy to take those.
So we've got one, which is a single vendor strategy not introducing a single point of failure and therefore more risk to our security strategy?
I think that everything comes out on a balance, and that if that single vendor technology is lacking, if it's got severe gaps in it, then yes, we putting in bad technology. But there are several providers out there. Microsoft is our partner and is absolutely the vendor we believe in, and having that single provider, we think, is less of an issue when they have the right portfolio and the right technology. And when we look at those vendors, they are significantly invested in their portfolios, the breadth of their portfolios, in enhancing those portfolios to this challenge of addressing that cyber risk. And so I would argue that when done right, it is more of an enabler, that you remove complexity, you remove overhead. And the reality is that good technology without the right skill set is wasted technology. It is idle if you're not getting the value out of it. And so if you have a team and you have 10, 15 different technologies, that's a hell of an investment on that team to be a master of so many different platforms, different skill sets. And I think we probably overstretch our team to achieve something, as opposed to the potential of all of those vendors individually. Okay, well, thank you everyone for your time. We will reach out and hopefully we'll see you in January at our Cybersecurity Summit. Have a good day.